Well, averting the looming strike of ASUU has been a raging storm that the federal government has been fighting hard to deal with. And just last week, there was a tripartite meeting between the House of Representatives and, of course, the federal government and ASUU. Well, joining me in this on the federal government and ASUU over the aspect of tackling the looming strike is the Uniben chapter ASUU chairman, and he is a lecturer of the University of Benin Department of English and Literature, and he is Dr. Ray Chikogu. Thanks for joining me, Dr. Ray.
Thank you.
Well, we've been following the issues concerning the looming strike that you are given warning over in terms of reaching an agreement, a memorandum of action between ASUU and the federal government. What page can you say we are in? Is there a green light that the federal government is meeting your demands?
Sad to say, there's nothing promising yet from our interactions with the federal government. As you had mentioned, when ASUU held its National Executive Council meeting from the 13th to the 14th of this month, at the end of which it reviewed the processes and discussions and agreements that had been reached with the federal government prior to that meeting. And it became obvious to members of that National Executive Council that the government was not serious, as it were, about acceding to the demands of the union. And the issues involved, I'm sure, they're in the public domain. Principal amongst which is the renegotiation of the 2009 ASUU federal government agreement. There are quite a number of components there, but that agreement has been now concluded. That's the negotiation has been concluded since May this year, and there was promise that the government will sign and implement. But this is November, and then nothing has been done. So at the end of that meeting, the union resolved to issue a 3-week ultimatum to the federal government to meet these demands, and if they don't, the union will be forced to embark on another round of strikes. So as we speak, nothing.
Okay, parents and even the children who are in public universities are worried. And we understand even the last strike that was held, we can only tell when it started, but no one can tell how long it's going to take. And we also understand that it facilitated the recruitment of students while the strike was on, that got blown up in the #EndSARS protest that turned into chaos. Now, aren't you worried as a union by this? And shouldn't this be a call to action for you to also be cautious in order not to bring another strike that could bring along distance between the government and the people?
Yeah, these are, unfortunately, again, these are some of the considerations that the union finds uncomfortable when especially members of the public make these comments. If you recall, that other strike was called during the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown. And so students were not in school. And so the union declared that strike while the students were already at home, so that people can understand that the intention is not to use students as a point of leverage to put pressure on the government. We have our children in those schools as well. And when the schools are shut down, our children are also at home with us. And so we thought that within the period that pandemic was on and the whole place was shut down, the federal government would have thought it wise to do what was necessary to avert whatever is happening now. But all through that period, about a year, government did nothing. And so the union had to eventually, because of this kind of talk and pressure about our students, about our children, and the public and all of that, ASUU was pressured to suspend that strike at the end of December 2020, during which, again, a series of meetings were held, and the federal government promised that by the end of December, all of those contending issues would have been resolved. And it's exactly 1 year after. Nothing has been done. I mentioned renegotiation. There's also the question of the end academic allowances. There's the question of the irregular payments from IPPIS. There's the question of a non-payment of promotion arrears dating back to 2016. Of course, from very meager salaries that people earn. I just said there was an agreement in 2009. And that agreement, it was also detailed that every 3 years, that agreement will be reviewed. Now, this is 2021. That's
okay. Okay, what's in that agreement? Because I hear you say renegotiation of the 2009 agreement. What's the keynote in that agreement?
Well, the agreement, what is important there, for example, will include the conditions of service. That is the take-home pay of the university lecturer. Isn't
that being addressed by the end allowances, or is that different?
No,
because we have reports that that we'll be paying about 22.17 billion naira as end allowances, and of course the 30 billion naira revitalization fund for universities as part of the first tranche.
Yes.
If that is met, won't you people at least give some fresh air?
I was just trying to say that you know, those are insignificant components of the agreement. What is important, what is substantial, what is fundamental about that agreement is the condition of service. The end academic allowances is only an aspect of the salaries that people take home. It's only a tiny component. What we are saying is that the agreement itself, the condition of service, since 2009 to 2021, every lecturer has been on the same salary. It doesn't happen anywhere. The same salary. In other words, if you were earning 200,000 naira, for example, in 2009, in 2021, you are still earning 200,000 naira. That's after about 12 years. Now, what it also means is that except something is done to that renegotiated agreement, what it also implies is that in another 5, 6, 7 years, you will still be on the same salary that you have been on since 2009. But you know that in our society, you know that things are changing, especially on the negative side. Prices are going up. Nothing remains the same except the salaries of university lecturers. Okay. So how do you survive? How do you compete in a society such as ours? To move, to make progress even in your profession, you need to make financial investments in terms of publication in journals. Otherwise, you will remain where you are. In terms of belonging to learned societies. Otherwise, you will be where you are from the same meager salary. So what people are doing, rather than focus on research and development, lecturers are thinking about how to survive.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay. In the tripartite meeting that was held last week, some persons said that was laudable. But do you see that meeting as fruitful?
Well, we're only hoping. This is not the first time we have had meetings. Before we embarked on this strike, there were a series of meetings, including meetings with the Chief of Staff of the President of the Federal Republic of this country. Even on the eve of that declaration of this ultimatum, there was also a meeting with the Chief of Staff, and he promised that he was going to intervene and then mediate between the union and all the parties that are concerned, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Finance, the Office of the Accountant General. And even at that meeting that you mentioned with the brokered by the Speaker of the House of Reps, Ndidi, that's the Minister of Labour, had said that the union will not be allowed to go on strike. He had even said that by Wednesday preceding the day that meeting was held, that those monies would have been released. You can ask any of the vice chancellors or any of the universities and see whether any penny has been released. So you can see that there's poverty of trust. Trust is deficient between the government and the people they govern.
Okay. The bottom line of this whole action or looming strike that you people are raging at seems to be on financial basis.
Well, we should not be ashamed to say we deserve we deserve to earn for the job that we do. If you look at it comparatively, look at Nigeria and look at even some countries in Africa that we used to even make jest of, you can see that we don't compete with them in any way at all. Now, apart from the question of financiers as salaries, we are also saying, for example, you mentioned 30 billion naira revitalization fund. That does not go to any lecturer. It goes direct to the administrators of the university so that the necessary facilities and infrastructure can be put in place for meaningful learning and teaching, so that our students can benefit maximally for the investment that their parents make in their education. Will you imagine, for example, that in many universities across this country, students contribute monies to purchase public address systems so that they can facilitate learning, because the classes are very large, and most of the time, those who are far away from the point where the lecturer is standing barely hear what he says. So they, on their own, make these contributions. And so we are saying that it cannot continue. We believe that the country has enough resources to fund education, because we also realize that no country will develop beyond the level of its education. If we don't do something about it now, you will see gradually we will slide into anarchy, because even the students who should be inspired by their lecturers and by their professors do not see anything meaningful, do not see anything beneficial in becoming a lecturer. So they are diverting their energies and their attention to some other means of survival. And then if that continues over a period of time, what will happen will only be better imagined. So all of these things you see and we hear now about banditry, about kidnapping, about Boko Haram and all of that, there is no way you can divorce all of this from the poverty of education in this country.
We keep seeing meetings where even the Minister of Labor and Employment, Chris Ngige, usually holds with ASUU, and of course even the tripartite meeting. And statements are made concerning making payments, like you said, but at the end of the day, it doesn't come to fruition. Do you seem to have this impression or thought that maybe what the minister says does not carry the authority of the presidency or government?
Well, it should, because he's an agent, he's a representative of the federal government, and beyond himself as an individual, there are others who also interact with them before these decisions are taken. For example, at the various meetings we have held leading up to the drafting of that draft of the agreement I was talking about, all the arms and agencies of government were represented. As I said, the Office of the Accountant General, Budget and Planning, salaries and wages, they were all represented. So I wouldn't be in a position to determine whether he actually represents government or not.
No. Let's look at the demands. At what point will ASUU be ready to back out from the looming strike in terms of federal government meeting certain demands? At what point? Because I understand that you may not want the federal government to, it's almost impossible for the federal government to attend to all the demands, even though it has been long coming, that you had that agreement, a memorandum of action. So at what point can you say, okay, this is what the union has received, we are suspending the looming strike?
For me, I think that the issues are clear and straightforward, and the items are few. There are things that the federal government, if the will exists, there are things that they can handle within the space of 1 week. The sums of money involved are nothing compared to what we hear that they fritter away on a daily basis, on a daily regular basis. So these things are not difficult for the government to do at all. And the danger in suspending after 1 or 2 items have been attended to is that we will have to face the possibility of embarking on another strike. Why don't we just take it this time and trash the matter once and for all? And then we don't have to endanger our academic calendars and the school system over and over and over again.
Okay, so you are saying that if the government makes some demands, for instance, that could make the union to suspend whatever plan of strike. But again, that could also be an opportunity to visit it again sometime. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? So it's better for the government to take a sweep on all the demands?
Yes, it's better for us and for the government to meet all the demands. As I said, there are just a few items. Okay. And if the will exists, they can do it within a very short period of time.
We have the University Transparency Accountability Solutions. Yes. We also have the aspect of the IPs. Yes. What are your thoughts on this?
We already expressed those thoughts many times over to say that, first of all, you know that this IPs is a foreign initiative sponsored by the World Bank and IMF, and you know what our experience has always been with the World Bank and the IMF, because they believe that we in this part of the world must be held in perpetual servitude. And so you go there and import this software that you acquired investing huge billions of taxpayers' money, and we have said you cannot take the data of the workforce of your country and put in one place in this period of cybercrime and all of that. In one day you will hear that everything has been cleaned out of that system. So we are saying we have developed the University Transparency and Accountability System. It's free for the government. They have tested at different levels. Even the end users, the registrars, the universities, and the boss, the vice chancellors, and the board, they have tested, and they say it is perfect. They say it is perfect. All that needs to be done is to deploy it, and but they won't want to do it because someone is benefiting something from the use of IPs. The monumental fraud that we have heard about in relation to IPs is clear. We had a case in 2017, that case was even being handled by the EFCC, where an individual imputed 50,000 names into that IPs platform. And so salaries are just going to pockets and places where we don't know. Someone had also come up on TV to say that she had been earning salary from IPs even though she was not employed. At the point where she was now to gain employment, they found that her name was already in the system, and says no, she wasn't employed. She was in the system as a police officer.
Okay. Let's, in case you're just watching, as TMI, and I've been having a chat with the ASUU chairman, Uniben chapter, Dr. Ray Chikogu, and he is a lecturer also in the Department of English and Literature. Well, I have this aspect where some are asking, because we have this challenge where about the best university in the country, which is University of Ibadan, it's been rated as 1,196 position globally. And some are saying this may not be far-fetched from the strike actions, although there are other contending issues. What do you think about this?
And it has nothing to do with strike actions at all. It has everything to do with the investment that the federal government is making in the education sector. You take education, you take health, look at the budget. They are the least attended to in terms of budgetary allocations. So it's the attention that the government is paying to education. That is why it is so. Go and visit all the universities. What facilities do you find there? What equipment do you find there? What infrastructure do you find there? How visible are these universities on the internet for everyone else to see? These are the basis on which these ratings are done. It has nothing to do with strikes.
Okay. Let's again look at this aspect where the union seem not to be on the same page with the non-teaching unions over the end allowances and the sharing formula, as a point of digression anyway. What are your opinions in this? Well, why this challenge?
This idea,
have you passed that stage?
This idea of sharing and sharing formula, it's not a largesse that has just fallen from the sky that you have to share. If you look at it, it's end academic allowance. End academic allowance. I'm talking about allowances that have already been earned many years ago. These are just arrears of those payments. They are earned. So we don't have any problems with our sister unions. They negotiated with the federal government. We also negotiated with the federal government. And there are things that are contained in our agreement. We are insisting that the terms of that agreement should be met.
Okay.
If there are things they have discussed with the federal government, they should interact also with the federal government. There's the idea of sharing, there's nothing to share.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ray Chikogo, for taking our time to be part of this discussion. Dr. Ray Chikogo is the ASUU Chairman, Uniben Chapter. Well, we're going to be taking a break where we're also going to be joined by other analysts where we'll look at the hashtag NSAS panel report and appraising the outcome. Do stay.